land.
Let's get into the inner workings and the meaning of this. Let's get into the inner workings and the meaning of a black revolution and why black people have a right to take what's theirs. You can read the platform in the program, and it's a basic program, and it simply says exactly what black people have been crying for 400 years. One, we want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our own black communities. Two, we want full employment for our people. Three, we want decent housing fit for shelter of human beings. Four, we want an end to the robbery of the black community by the white racist businessman. Five, we want decent education that teaches us about the true nature of this racist, decadent system, and education that teaches us about our true history and our role in the society and the world today. Six, we want all black brothers to be exempt from military service. Seven, we want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of black people. 8, we want all black brothers and sisters held in federal, county, state, city, jails, and prisons to be released because they have not had a fair trial. They've been tried. They've been tried by all white juries who have no understanding of the average reasoning man in the black community. Number 9, and this is where Brother Huey is being caught. We just want the courts to make sure we have peers on the jury or people from the black community as defined by the jive Constitution of the so-called United States. The 10 is a summary with a major political objective, and that is we want land, we want bread, we want housing, we want clothing, we want education, we want justice, and we want peace. And the major political objectives, we want a black plebiscite, and the UN, the black colonial subjects will participate in dealing with, and analyzing, projecting politically upon the racist atrocities that have been committed against black people in this nation.
I guess I can't say too much more than the movie had to say, but I'd like to welcome to Detroit Black Journal, and I'm sure all of the audience knows, and by now, in the next few minutes, you will know that our guest for tonight is one of the survivors of the struggle of the last 10 years. And I'm welcome to say, and I'm glad that Detroit Black Journal has an opportunity to have someone who has survived and who struggles so diligently for the people throughout this world. That's Bobby Seale.
Thank you.
Okay. You obviously remember those words that you said, and that was in Oakland sometime in the late 60s at Bobby Hutton Memorial Park.
Right.
What's happened since then, Bobby? I mean, what's
a lot of
what's
things
going
have
on?
happened. The struggle in this country, the total movement, it's happened in such a way that, well, I can say this here, the power structure got very slick about early 1970s. See, the power structure learned that over a 12-year period, they attacked the civil human rights aspect, they attacked the political revolutionaries, they attacked even the anti-war movement aspect, and the more they attacked, the more and more support we got. They got slick and realized suddenly that, let's stop attacking. And suddenly, one day, if you notice, there were no more attacks against any aspects of the movement in this country in the early 70s. That's one thing that's happened. That's what began to take the tide of the struggle in this country to what you call a low tide. Myself, in July 1974, I resigned from the Black Panther Party. And I told Brother Hugh, I said I was going to resign in about 3 to 4 months. And the party at that time had dwindled to something about like, I guess about close to 300 party members in the country.
That's down from, say, 10,000.
Down from 10,000, a peak 10,000 in 1969. In 1969, before I was arrested, put in jail, before the Chicago conspiracy trial occurred, before the murder trial that occurred in New Haven, where I was put up there, at that point, that was a heavy peak of the Black Panther Party. A lot of things have happened overall. I would say that one thing that didn't happen for us is that the political revolutionary aspect and also the civil human rights aspect of the movement of the 60s concerning black people's liberation struggle in this country, it did not leave us with a practical ideological goal objective. It should have left us with that. That's why we got a lot of young black people today who are not aware of what went down in the 60s. They are not aware of the significance of the 60s.
That's true, because when I talk to young people today, and I mention you or Huey Newton or Malcolm X or whatever, black people today, young blacks, teenagers, and some even in their 20s, have no recollection, no understanding.
Right. People right. There's a lot of people, you know, that's 19, 20, 21 years old. They're just not aware of when I was chained, gagged, and shackled to a chair. They're not aware of when Malcolm X was murdered and assassinated. They know about Martin Luther King because he's been talked about quite a bit more so. They're not aware of Medgar Evers. Mentioned even the deacons for defense down in the South. Right. They're not aware of this, you know. They don't know what kind of struggle a lot of black brothers and sisters put up. They don't understand the complete turnaround that black people made in the mid-60s, because there was a time when black people were calling themselves colored, Negro, and accepting indirectly or directly the derogatory connotations related to those words as it came from the white racist framework of this country. And black people made a complete turnaround. So we're black, meaning we accept ourselves as human beings. We're black people and are defined in terms of we're Afro-Americans, what have you. And we recognize our descendancy. That was a very crucial era, you know.
What made Bobby Seale become revolutionary chairman of the Black Panther Party? Now, I know from both reading the book and know from having been involved myself during the period what we know, but from a personal level, what made you go through the changes that you went through? Because you were, I would imagine, call yourself colored at one time.
Yeah, I did. I call myself colored, you know, C-U-L-L-U-D, colored, that kind of colored, you know. Yeah, you see, I grew up like the average black brother would grow up, you know. I had problems. We have a lot of problems in home frameworks and stuff like this here. In effect, really, I stumbled into the struggle, you know, because after the military service, I got kicked out of the Air Force after 3 years, 11 months, and 11 days of a 4-year enlisted tour because I got into it with some racist colonel. Colonel of my squadron, but I was not politically aware. I was just reacting to that racism that was there without being able to define it and articulate its reason for being there or why I was being subjected to it. When I went to college, later on, after I come out of the military service a year and a half, after I'd been a comedian and a jazz drummer and all these kind of things.
Let me interrupt you for a minute. I want you to come back to that.
Okay.
I want you to tell us how you became a comedian. Just don't forget that.
Well, because really, as a kid, I was somewhat of a comedian. Really? And it was like trying to block out the lapping soles on the shoes and the dirty clothes and the holes in the clothes and stuff, because we were criticizing the community. See, my father was a master carpenter. My father owned his own cabinet shop, and the community would criticize us. We had raggedy furniture and stuff like that, and he wouldn't bring his money home. My father used to make very, very good money. In fact, my father had a brand new car all through the 1930s Depression and a job. You see, but he was not an educated man, and so it was about telling jokes and acting silly to overcome the criticisms in the community. I think that's why I learned to tell jokes. So when I was not an introverted person, that's the way I was. I was extroverted then, you know. So I learned jokes and lies and stuff in the Air Force, and then later on, so one day I got up in front of the audience and started telling some lies, some joke. What I did though is that those are the days when I used to make jokes about black folks eating watermelon, white folks jokes, man. Right, I used to make jokes about white hillbillies and stuff like this here to try to turn it around.
That was sort of unique at the time, because now Richard Pryor can do it and get millions of dollars.
Well, Richard Pryor is the superb. I love that brother because he can bring out so much reality relevant to what the heck's going on and everything got to do. I don't know if people have seen this last flick of his, but I haven't even had a chance to see it, but I read reviews on it. It's fantastic what that brother does, you know. Because every time I hear the record, the latest one, Want It, I falls out of my chair, you know. It's one of them things, you know.
So in a sense, even during that period, you were developing consciousness about various
Well, okay, being a comedian also helped me to be able to speak in front of audiences, too. This is before the Black Panther Party ever was conceived of, you know. Later I come out and I stumble into the struggle. You know, I was out one day and some brother was blowing on the street corner talking about what white folks do to us, et cetera, and what we don't know about our history. And I thought they were right, you know, and I went to college to be an engineering major. I'd been in college a year then, and I shifted all the way over to the social sciences, you know, in a matter of another semester or two. And the next thing I know, I was involved in the Afro-American Association, later the Afro-American Study Group, later RAM, Revolutionary Action Movement, and then Huey and I created the Negro History Fact Group at Merritt College. And we also created, they gave us plaques for one of the first black student unions in the country, which was Soul Students Advisory Council at Merritt College. After that, we created and put together and founded the Black Panther Party in October 1966.
Now you have a book out. I intended to go to this later, but I want to get a shot of it now because so much of what you're talking about is incorporated in this book, A Lonely Rage, which is your autobiography.
Let me explain that book. This is my autobiography, really. It's really not the pros and cons of what to do with the liberation struggle. I have another book altogether I have to write. This book is about me coming from 5 years of age up through the Black Panther Party. The title of the book is A Lonely Rage. Brother James Baldwin, who's a good friend of mine, you know, he got me to go ahead and name that book A Lonely Rage. The original title was called It Ain't No Sin, but we may make a movie later on and call it Ain't No Sin. But this book is about me, you know. It's about me growing up.
Why was it called A Lonely Rage? Now, I read it.
Because what happened is when I wrote the book, originally the working title, when I got the contract to do the book, you know, and the advance to do it, that was about a month after I resigned from the Black Panther Party. I wrote the book, and it came out that way. The theme came out, A Lonely Rage. And Jimmy Baldwin, with James, you know, he says, I let him read all the material before it was published. He says, Bobby, why do you want to name it It Ain't No Sin? This is the way he talks, this is the way Jamie is, you know, with his big, frog eyes. You know? And I said, I don't know, man. You know, I said, I thought it would be It Ain't No Sin. He says, what are you trying to say with It Ain't No Sin? I says, well, I said, I guess I'm trying to say it ain't no sin to have a lonely rage. He says, then why don't you forget about it ain't no sin and just title it what it means. The theme is a lonely rage and call it A Lonely Rage. This is old Jimmy Baldwin, you know. But we went on and went with that title, you know. The book is written like a novel. It reads like a novel. It is not the pros and cons of what to do in the liberation struggle. As you told me, I'm going to write another book on that.
Have you
just for some of the titles.
Have you been asked that a lot? I mean, I know you're just sort of answering it before it comes up, it seems, because a number of people have said to me, well, you know, Bobby does not lay out in this book any pattern for liberation.
Yeah, but that's because a lot of people want the 1960s to come back exactly in the 1980s. Nothing will never be exactly the same in the future, quote unquote exactly. You have to understand that. Things change. It may be similar, but not exactly. But I had to do 2 books. Now, actually, I wrote 400,000 words for this autobiography. We wound up editing it down for this theme. There's a total another book, and we realized we weren't going to get all the stuff that went down the Black Panther Party in this book. So we were saving that content for another era, especially for the 1980s, called The Rise and the Decline of the Black Panther Party. At least that's the working title now.
It's interesting because I read the book, and I was really... Now, I knew that you could, you know, you rap pretty well. But I did not know that you wrote that well. And reading the book, I mean, it was really easy reading, you know, because you could go straight through.
Well, what I did is, you know, like, I always loved Richard Wright, Black Boy and others. Richard Wright had the great ability of integrating fiction techniques into a nonfiction work. I've always loved it. Huey writes with a little lot of political prose and philosophical points of view. Eldridge Cleaver was an old essay writer, you see what I mean? But I'm a storyteller. I love to tell stories about what happened, what went down. And I adopted that Richard Wright style, although I can't write as well as Richard Wright.
Well, I mean, no, but you, just in my own humble impression, I think the writing is really good. One thing you mentioned a lot of in that book is, and I thought The Lonely Rage might have been about that, was the growing conflict between you and your father. And I remember one thing early in the book where you're talking about how your father whipped you about washing a shirt and how he just whipped you seemingly for nothing. And I know I have gone through some of those similar things. You think that's similar with a number of black men?
Especially black males. Especially more so black males. Black males have a great problem. I don't know how it is nowadays, but at least coming up in my era, the whippings and the beatings by a father, the harsh whippings and beatings by the father. I even run an organization called Homicide Prevention. Right. And we've deduced through our research that the great cause, not only of black people, but it's across the board through all races and groups, the great cause of why people kill each other, conflict-motivated, crime or passion type, and assault and beat, is because of violent type upbringing, harsh whippings and beatings. Even though, and the majority of these happen in law-abiding citizens who think they'll never kill or never hurt anybody, but can explode. What they've done is regress back to the old desire to be able to be aggressive, to stop the harsh beatings or harsh whippings. It's talked about maladaptive aggressive behavior, but that's a whole other point.
There's one thing that happened in the book, just before we go to the audience, that I want you, if you feel like it, just mentioning part of it. You got one chapter in there called Uncle Sammy Called Me a Whole Lot of Lucifer.
Uncle Sammy Called Me Full of Lucifer.
Okay, it was an anti-Vietnam poem.
Yeah, it was a poem at the time we were organizing the Black Panther Party, organizing the Soul Citizens Advisory Council on the campus. I used to love this poem. It's by a brother named Ronald Stone. I don't know if he's dead or not. Leroy Jones and Mahmoud Baraka used to know him pretty well. But I don't want to recite that whole poem.
No, I just
Uncle Sammy Called Me Full of Lucifer. In other words, you have to imagine this poem back at the time when black people shouldn't have been drafted to go in Vietnam. Uncle Sammy called me full of Lucifer. Well, I don't give a good eagle-eyed McFleekle triple whammy damn, for I feel his false stick will not serve. Uncle Sammy, don't shuck and jive me. I'm hip to popcorn jazz changes you blow. You know damn well what I mean. You school my naive heart to sing red, white, and blue, stars and stripes songs, and to pledge eternal allegiance to all things blue, true, blue-eyed, blonde-haired, white chalk, white skin with USA tattooed all over. When my soul trusted Uncle Sammy and loved Uncle Sammy and grew up and died in dreams playing wall for Uncle Sammy. Yeah, you jam your emasculate manhood similar. And then we have to cut off, because I'm getting ready to get real cold.
I know. But I just wanted to give the audience an indication of what's in the book.
Well, I got arrested behind that point. Right. I had cut him one cop. I caught him across the van. Huey had to whoop another one. It's a big story. You have to read this book for yourself.
Okay, I know everybody here specifically. Myself, you mentioned the Black Panther Party. Why did you leave the party?
I left the party because we were dwindling down to 200 members, because I knew we weren't going to do the exact same things in the past as what's going to happen in the future. I wanted to get into something else. I also needed a rest, but at the same time, I knew I had a notion I wanted to do the autobiography. So I took 2.5 years to write the autobiography. I also did some in-depth studies about the economics of the country, also realizing that the tide of the struggle was very low. That's basically why I left it. It's a wise man who moves on to new things, you know what I mean? So, I will not stand and toll the bell on something that's dwindled another way. I'll go on to the next thing.
Which fits right into the question. Okay.
Bobby, first of all, welcome to Detroit.
Right on,
and my question is, since most of the leaders of the 60s are all gone, Angela Davis, Huey P. Newton, H. Rap Brown, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, the list is endless, men and women. You said in the beginning of the program that they were new tactics came up to get rid of our leaders. I'm glad that you survived, but what is in store for you?
What am I doing
now? What is your future like? Do you feel that you've fought a lost battle?
No.
And what is in store for you?
All right, presently I'm the director of an organization called Advocates Seen. I founded and created and put this organization together with some of the other old veterans from the old movement approximately 2 years ago. Advocates Seen is a militant-style, unorthodox lobby organizing network in this country. It's about representing the working taxpayer in general, but more in particular and more significantly, it's about representing the near 60 million poor and low-income people in this country, inclusive of black and minority people's civil and human rights. It's about trying to get back into the community with numerous extension offices in numerous cities across this country, and aiding existing organizations in the community, especially the near 600 near non-functioning black and minority organizations in this country, to understand know how to deal with the fine particulars and methodology of effective organizing in the community. It's about building a national framework. In other words, the 60s was about spontaneous mass conscious raising. The 80s has got to be about community-based, programmatic, political-oriented organizing down in the community. It's got to be about a network around this country To me, I'm going to put my time into this and build this network, hopefully in the next 7, 8, 9, 10 years. I'm going to take this network as it develops and as it grows, and I'm turning it over to the young black youth in this country as a framework also to build new black leadership. In about 10 years, and this is just hypothetical, I hope to have my law degree. So while y'all are out there doing the hard, nitty-gritty work, then come to call me, and I'll be ready to go to court to defend you if anything you get in trouble with, because I know the value of that since I went through the same.
What I'd like to ask is, I'm very surprised that you admit that black men in this country have a deep-rooted and very sincere problem. The next question I have is, what do you do to go and change it? You are talking about you're going to turn this great program in the 80s over to the young youth. But I really hate to say it, that looking at the situation as it is now, you don't have anybody to turn anything over to. Black people have become very apathetic towards everything, including living. So how do you go about, you got to change, the inherent problems of black people before you move out?
In the early 1960s, black people were more apathetic then than they are now. One, people said that by me going out there with guns to patrol police and put such a program together, that it would be impossible for it to work. I am saying we affected the situation socially so much that right now, today, we can say in this country, at least down south, along with other aspects of the movement, 90% of the lynching that used to exist in this country in the early 60s and late 50s doesn't exist anymore. Sure, that's 10% of lynching still going on, even though we got a lot of people registered to vote. But those are only stepping stones. I've been 15 years in the struggle. I don't mind going out there, and I like having these ideals, goals, and things to work for. Young black people in this country can be reached. I remember the time they called themselves colored, don't call me black, etc., and those young black people back then was ultimately reached through a Lord Bright. And it's not only me. It's going to take a lot of other people. I got a lot of young veterans, old veterans from the old struggle. Once we get our framework sit together, and I just think that I believe that by putting this network together is at least one last-ditch stand I can do. I'm 40 years old, okay? I got to be able to put something together. I haven't given up the struggle, And by the way, Rap Brown is still around. He's getting ready to move. I want to let you know that. And Stokely is still trying to do a few things. I know that there's some of the other guys that just flaked out, and there's a lot of frustration, but I don't think everything is totally dead. And I understand the apathy. The apathy has to do with the media sometimes. It has to do with not letting black people, young black people right now know what went down in the 60s. It has to do with corralling that framework. It has to do with superficializing too many black images on TV, and black people and a lot of young black people think everything's all right. It has to do with a lot of parents not telling their kids the significant righteous thing that went down in the 60s that even put us where we at now, and at the same time where we at now is not the end of the liberation struggle because there's unemployment, dilapidated housing, etc. I guess that's the best way I can answer your question, sister.
You've been speaking about the need for continued education, really, of the young people coming up. Do you have some constructive ideas that we can begin to implement on a community level to continue that education, and also the communication that the media afforded us in the 60s between what was going on the West Coast, folks heard about on national news at least, and they have since, effectively decided to that was not in their best interest.
All right.
How do we continue to communicate? What are some of the methods that we can use to
all right, in the in-community level framework, when I start talking about extension offices in different communities, it's about teaching a lot of organizations how to put good periodicals together. The Black Panther Party newspaper, I was really the founder in the framework of the party of that newspaper. I understood the need for a good political organ. It's about numerous political organs being put together and well put together and communicating to the people with numerous existing organizations who don't do so right now, and I'm talking about on top flight levels. On the other level of educational institutions, I would suggest one of the most creative and constructive things that can be done now is that black educators in this country get together, call a conference, put it together, and make it top flight and begin to try to make an impact on the curriculums, especially in the grammar school levels. I'm a smoker, for instance. I shouldn't be smoking. But I should have been taught in school about health. You know, white kids learn about law. They know about when they get 18 and 19 years old about how to start a corporation. But the average black kid doesn't know that, okay, hypothetically in some states, $56 you can incorporate a corporation. Law, broke down in terms of how children can understand it, should be put in curriculums. This hasn't been done. These are the kind of things we've been missing. I think black educators' responsibility in this country should be going in this area in many other creative ways beyond what I've just mentioned. This is what's got to begin to happen.
Bobby, one of the things in the 60s that was very key was the whole movement in terms of rediscovering our history.
Mm-hmm.
And I consider it like one of the responsibilities of people in the media to do exactly what we're doing here today, to have you on and a number of other people
mm-hmm.
who are making history and have made history.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you see any way possible that we are in a position to take control over some communications apparatus that, as you suggest, and really develop them to the degree that you suggest. In other words, like television and mass communication, not only newspapers.
You know, a lot of black people don't realize it, but even when they talk about this 7% increase in the middle class growth since the Kerner report 10 years ago, there are a lot of black people with a lot of skills and a lot of talent around this country. You know? I am saying that these things are feasible. But you see, before I can answer that question, you have to understand, grandmas and old mamas give us that old slave mentality. Now, child, you go to school and get yourself a good education so you can get a job, a good job. What they should be telling, I want you to go to school, get yourself a good education. I want you to understand what it means to incorporate and erect frameworks, be they media frameworks, be they health frameworks, be they be what. Learn how to go into association, go into business through contract frameworks, et cetera, and set up corporations, et cetera, and make economic frameworks work. You see what I mean? That's what it's about when you get down to the nitty-gritty about it. Black folks have got to understand it's not going to college and getting an education just to get a good job. Black folks got to understand it. Even if you go to college, a lot of young brothers, I ain't going to college, ain't no jobs, no way. That's not the point. That's your slave mentality, young black brother who refused to go to college, young black sister who refused to go to college. It's about whether it's not any jobs. I'd rather see 2 million black people trying to enroll in college and getting out, and if there wasn't no jobs, the education you got will allow you to organize and wage revolution in this country to make sure you change and take control over more political institutions.
Okay, on that note, I'd like to wrap up, and we'll be back, and I'd like to thank our guest, Bobby Seale, for being here. We'll be back to continue this discussion.
Tried living on streets that weren't giving and lacking pride.